Hey everyone, welcome to episode 49 of the Igan Carlos Tennis Show. This is our Australian Open recap episode. We didn't get to doing an episode after the first week because, well, two reasons. One, it's just really hard to fit it in with our busy schedules. And also, well, Iga and Carlos were kind of cruising in the first week. And so the main storylines and, takeaways really come from the second week of their performances. And no, we do not have a double. The champion on the women's side is Madison Keys, which was a brilliant story. She saved a match point against Iga Świątek along the way. So actually, let's start with that. Let's start with Świątek because the first 5 rounds, she looked really, really good. She only lost serve twice, and that was in the opening match against Siniakova. And since then, yes, she had a friendlier draw than obviously, 12 months ago, which was just possibly the toughest draw you could have asked for. But still, nonetheless, she came through. She passed all the tests with flying colors, and she found herself in a close battle with Madison Keys. So, where do you kind of stand on her first 5 rounds and how she's looked? You know,
Yeah, I think the first 5 rounds, maybe there weren't any surprises, but just the fact that she was pushing through the draw like this, I think our expectations kind of started shifting. We're at the very beginning of the week, and that's definitely on the last episode, we said that like a semi-final is very much needed here in order to say that she's actually made some progress in regards to the appearances before the slams, in the slams that aren't at Roland Garros. But at the same time, the way that the week was progressing, the tournament was progressing, I think more and more we were already thinking about the final. So of course we're gonna get to that, and in a way, in many ways, in fact, this result is a little disappointing, even if it's still, that minimum expectation we had, the semifinals, it was achieved, and it was achieved in a manner that I think was, yeah, definitely much more pleasant than I thought it would be. Sure, some of the opposition, like Eva Liz, we're getting into this match, and you just kind of know it's gonna be a beatdown. I think the same way Raducanu, right? I mean, if you put Anisimova or Alexandrova there, so the players that actually Emma beat in order to get to Iga, I think these matches could have been more difficult. But then again, we are also running into matches like against Emma Navarro, where we're thinking, okay, this is much more difficult than Kasatkina would have been. Yeah, this actually could be a pretty good test. And it's kind of not, even if I know that you said that it was like one of the, actually, you said ever, right? You said that is the most lopsided 6-1-6, sorry, the least lopsided 6-1-6-2 you've ever seen or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely just a breeze. And going into the semis, we were already thinking a little too much about the final, maybe sometimes. But that was simply how it was looking, right? I mean, that was simply how our expectations were shifting throughout the fortnight.
yeah, for sure. And obviously, we weren't underestimating Keys. We knew she came in with a lot of confidence. She'd obviously won Adelaide the week before. Played all these three setters. She's transformed her game in many ways, and she beat Rybakina on the way there, Collins. So she beat a really good list of players. But then you're still coming into the Iga match in the semifinal, and you're thinking, okay, like most likely it's going to be an Arena Iga final, especially after Arena won the first, semi against Badosa. You're kind of thinking, all right, like we're almost there. We've been in this position once before already in 2023 Roland Garros, where Sabalenka was 1 point away against Muhova. Although here, I have to say the Keys match, it really surprised me in many ways how it played out because it was Keys who got the early two breaks. Like she broke and then Świątek breaks back and then she breaks again. But then Świątek goes all the way up to 5-2 and she has this backhand line that she was had she made that she would have won that set 6-2. But instead it became a lot more complicated. Keys with a really heavy hitting, the way she was kind of taking on a lot of the shots. Her backhand down the line was so good. Like this was a different Keys to and on a different court profile too. The matches obviously we saw between them in the clay season last year. So, but still, Iga pulls out that first set 7-5. Were you like really surprised by how how the second set played out after Świątek got that lead?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely quite disappointing, especially the serving, which again just kind of, broke down, wasn't really giving Iga anything. I mean, this matchup has always been about how much early pressure in the rallies Keys can like, pull off, how much of like return winners and return forced errors she can produce. Of course, yeah, as you said, the conditions that they played in before, never really in things like this. So like, yeah, it was clay, or maybe it was Cincinnati, which is also not like the Australian Open courts we're playing this year. So I think that from that standpoint, we maybe didn't really know what to expect. But yeah, the second set was just like a total beat down. Of course, it could have been a bagel. That would have been the first bagel for that Iga. Of course, she's usually on the other side of this, right? So on the losing end of a bagel, it would have been the first one since June 2021. So yeah, that would have been quite the story. But of course, she breaks. She then gets broken back. So it's still a breadstick, still something she doesn't really happen to her that often. And then, of course, yeah, just in terms of keys, sort of like the way she played the entire match, maybe even especially when it got closer again in the third set, and then the holds sort of were for Iga also started coming. Yeah, I think she showed like many multiple dimensions to her game that maybe usually we don't think about. Because usually you just think of Madi in this matchup, especially as like, yeah, she has to be so aggressive from the very first point. And later on, we learned that, yeah, not necessarily. I mean, she can also hold up when she's actually playing a longer point, physically, mentally, just in terms of hitting with some bigger margins. I know that a lot of people just credit this to her husband and coach, Bien Fratangelo. I am very much in favor of this. Bien Fratangelo was such a good player to watch on the challenger circuit. So anytime we can give him credit, definitely go for it. So yeah, I think these like slightly increased margins definitely help keys there. But yeah, the second set, the fact that it like ran away from Iga so quickly, it was a little worrying. But of course, given what happened in the deciding sets, yeah, it was just good that it didn't have any lasting effect.
Yeah, and Iga's serve in the second set, she won 6 out of 22 points, and I kind of think at some point she was already thinking about the third. With just how one-sided it was. It reminded me a little bit of the Osaka match where the racket was just taken out of her hand in the second set, and you weren't necessarily expecting that from Naomi at the time. And I think kind of similarly here, but yeah, so many improvements Keys has made in her game. Obviously, she's switched to a pinpoint stance on the serve. She's lowered her ball toss. She's was switched the Yonex to a Yonex frame. She's gone like from all gut to like you know or it was like half poly, half gut. Now it's all poly. So she has a lot more control and like trust in her equipment, and she's kind of just like has this new outlook. Like she's gotten married. She just feels really good. She's able to dissociate herself from, coming so close and not winning the slams to feeling like, okay, I can be satisfied even if I don't win a major. At this point in my career, and I can still be happy with myself. It took her a while to get to that stage, but she's somebody who I think since what the last 20 years has been. She was labeled as a future Grand Slam winner at like age 11 or 12, and she's like almost 30 now. So it's been a lot for her to deal with the pressure and expectations. But you saw like how dangerous she can be when she just commits to her game in those big moments, because I mean, there wasn't that much that Iga did wrong in the third set. Like, I mean, sure, she'll have a few regrets, Like there were certainly some chances that she had, but still, she served for the match, and Maddie comes up with this really, really good deep return, like down the middle, that just rocks Iga on her back foot on the backhand, and then you have another really good return, and then you have a double fault, and then all of a sudden you're in a 10 point tiebreak, and yeah, these are like matches we saw Iga pull out, last year against Osaka and against Sabalenka in the Madrid final. And so this is one of the rare times, in fact, maybe the only time that she's lost from match point up, and served for a match and couldn't close. But there's certainly a lot of positives to take away from it, right? Like her ground game, I thought in the third set was pretty good. I mean, the serve wasn't great for her in this match, but like the ground game from the baseline, she was a lot more patient. She was using a lot more higher loopier shots when defending. So I thought there were quite a lot of positives from it, even though it was a crushing defeat.
Yeah, I kind of like the fact that both players had this like clutch moment, even before the 5-0 break, right? So the one where Iga could have broken from like love 40, I think, and then also Iga saves herself in a tricky situation, and like yeah, it just felt like okay, it's not going to be a match where we're just gonna say yeah, this is another horrible choke for Keys at a major close to the title or something like that. I know that people would be all over that sort of like narrative. So I was glad to see that wouldn't be the case, given that they were both performing under pressure. And yeah, I just think Iga was so tense as well throughout the third set. Like you could see it in the way that she was setting up for the ground strokes. There's this one break point, right, where she has like a mid court forehand, and I know it's not
Yeah.
exactly a shot that you have to finish off, but you can see that she's just so nervous at it and basically just requires good feeling. Like you can't just play it regularly. You have to kind of just adjust there. And that's very tough when you're mentally already like, yeah. And then of course the double faults coming in, the beginning of the breaker, and at 6-5. like, yeah, you could just see that she's so much more tense than she was in matches like against Sabalenka in Madrid, the ones you mentioned, right? When she was clutching it out. And you never really felt like that tension is there, even if she was getting outplayed against by Osaka for like a set and a half. You never really felt like she was that scared of losing as she was here against Keys, or maybe scared of winning against Keys. Kind of goes both ways, I suppose. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's a good point by
so
the way.
that was maybe like my negative takeaway. Was it a good match in terms of anything else but the ground game, as you said? Yeah, the defending was good. I think she was extending points as we kind of wish that she would, and generally this Australian Open was a good example of that for the most part. Yeah, it's maybe more so when she actually got the chance to take over when issues started coming, and of course the serve. Yeah, like the serve just continued being attackable.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember that really tense forehand that she hit in the net at like 4 all 30 40, and that was the one that I kind of circled. I was like, oh, very, very tense. So, she doesn't end up, and I kind of feared for her in the next game because she was down 15-30, and, she could have lost serve there. But then she ends up obviously breaking back the next game, and Keys goes for that drop shot, but Iga's ready for it, and she hits the pass. And yeah, I mean, I was expecting her to close it out at 6-5 40-30, not gonna lie. But also in the tiebreak as well, she was up. She had leads all throughout. 3-1, 4-2. 6-4, 7-5. I think was the one, and then at 7-all, we have that really spectacular point where, Keys runs up to this drop shot and she sprints for it. She hits this really good cross court forehand, but Iga's ready for it, so she hits the volley winner, and it's 8-7. And at that point, yeah, mini breaks were being retrieved left and right, but Keys then like holds on and she hits an ace, I believe, on the next point, and then another service winner that was just too good. And then obviously there's that forehand again that kind of, yeah, she overcooks it on match point. Pretty tense there as well in the arm. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I left feeling still pretty overall. Like once Keys won the whole tournament, I was like, all right, most of this match was indoors. That's another thing we have to mention. So, obviously that's more favorable for Maddie than Iga. There's no doubt about that. Um, and the fact that Maddie was able to replicate that same level of clutchness in the final against Sabalenka pretty much at the end of that match makes you feel like, oh wow, like I mean, she really is. Keys is literally like the best player this year so far. It's only been a month, but
Yeah, Clara Towson number three, Arena Sabalenka number two. I guess Clara Towson can be alongside Iga at number three because she defeated Maddie Keys. She's the only person who did that, and also she
yeah,
lost to Sabalenka in a tight battle. But yeah, actually after the semis, like my main irritation, because you guys probably know by now that I'm not gonna be like freaking out. Like I wish for Carlos and Iga to do well for sure, but I'm not
yeah,
gonna be watching these matches and I'm not gonna be freaking out or I don't know. I don't have this like feeling in my stomach, after they lose or something
mhm,
like that. But my main point of irritation was that, like, okay, but what if we get a horrible final now? Remembering what Keys did in 2017 against Stevens. And yes, I know 7.5 years worth of experience, but actually, is it experience if you don't really get to experience these moments since? And if you've had, let's say, at least one match where you should have made another Grand Slam final. Obviously, 2023 US Open, she beat Sabalenka 6-3, 6-love, 6-3, sorry, 5-3 in the
yeah,
second set, and then still loses that. So that's what I was afraid of. But definitely my feeling was that, I mean, if Keys is gonna repeat this in the final, not even win, but just give us an amazing match, then I mean, yeah, go for it. I think obviously I know that you've also shared this opinion over the years, but like, yeah, her natural kind of like ball striking talent was always just definitely slam worthy. And she
yeah,
was a player who I kind of thought, okay, yeah, one day, hopefully. And this one day came here and in the shape of like an absolutely incredible run that basically had her win maybe the most impressive first slam title campaign ever. Who knows if not one of the most impressive slam title campaigns generally. And and yeah, from that perspective, I think because of what happened in the final, it's definitely also easier to kind of like take that loss. And yeah, in the third set tiebreak, as you said, the two service winners in a row, or yeah, I think one of them was an ace, one of them wasn't, but that was just so massive. The entire 10-point tiebreak, I don't think we really had that many unreturned serves.
yeah,
They actually had to like fight for points, and then suddenly Madi just like comes up with these two on the spots. That was just incredible. And yeah, I mean, I'm not really gonna like to go too much into the last point. Yeah, I think yeah, sure, match point down. it can happen to you for sure. Overall, the tension in Iga's game was definitely there, but these two service winners, when I saw them, like I was like, oh yeah, I mean, in this okay, on this occasion, on this opportunity, it's just absolutely massive. And Keys kind of maybe even in the final showed like even more gutsy tennis and simply was even more about like the purity with which she strikes the ball. Some of these like 5-all, 30-all points in the third set and the next one as well, 40-30. Like yeah, it's just kind of like ridiculous hitting. I know a lot of people who also I tend to bring this up, but like I have a few friends who like don't really watch the WTA tour, and I always say that Muchova is their favorite player, but actually they were all like so amazed with Keys as well. They were comparing her forehand to Jeremy Chardy, and it actually kind of makes sense. Like they do flatten it
Oh,
out pretty
okay. Yeah.
similarly, yeah. Like
Yeah,
especially
I didn't
that
think of
that
it like
shot
that.
5 or 30 all. That's a pretty famous Keys forehand by now, and I think it looks exactly like Jeremy Chardy would do it. And yeah, it was super fun to watch to see her just get this glory that people had been, as you said, foretelling for her for many years in this manner. Because yeah, to beat the best two players in the world and to clutch it out like this, it's incredible.
Yeah, that 5-all 30-all point is gonna stay in my mind like almost as much as the cannon hold, that people
Hmm.
talk about in 2020. It's like one of those moments that just, it's like the defining moment of the tournament. And I don't know, I mean, to execute that shot, at that moment, and then to do what she did in the tiebreak, like you said, the last 2 points. I mean, this was just like, yeah, you just have to say too good sometimes, and I feel like this might be one of those moments. But I wasn't feeling this way, before the final. I wasn't feeling this way before the final. I also had the similar type of fear that, like, hopefully Keys is able to really deliver on this promise in the final. And
Do
yeah,
you think that for Iga it's also easier to stomach a loss like this? I saw people making this case. I'm not sure I agree with it. I think it's definitely easier for the fans
so for
to
us it's
stomach.
easier, but for Iga, I think she'll probably be in torn minds about it, right? Like on the one hand, she wishes she was in the final, and if that could have been her, maybe lifting the trophy, and then yeah, maybe the other side of her brain says, well, at least you won the title, you know.
Yeah, I think for Iga it doesn't actually help all that much. But for the fans, I think it should be easier to stomach. Yeah, the fact that Keys was also able to perform like this 2 days later.
Yeah, I think it's one thing if you like lose in the second round or the third round, and
Hmm.
then the opponent goes on and win the title. Versus, but if you're in the semis and you're like so close, then I imagine it actually doesn't feel all that great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean definitely not, and especially to people as ambitious as Iga. I was actually like in Spain randomly in November. I was talking to a Polish coach who was there just for the doubles final, and
Uh-huh.
he kind of just started talking about Iga and like the mentality of showing up at events, let's say 15 events a year, and every single time you don't win the event, you just come out disappointed, right? I mean, it's never really a win unless you win an event if you're someone like Iga,
Yeah.
both considering her like ambition, but also her potential and her overall results. And I mean, his point was definitely that it's just super tough, as a player like this. And yeah, I guess it's impossible to kind of just feel good about this loss from Iga's perspective. But at the same time, sure, it was the first semifinal at a non-Roland Garros major in quite a while. So
Yeah. Sure. I mean, I was just also very impressed that Keys was able to hold up physically, because that's always been an issue with her as well, right? Like, I mean, we know she can play 5 great matches in a row, but can she play 6, 7? Like, here she kind of just does 12, and it's like, against super elite players. Like the whole Adelaide run is just insane. Like,
12 in
even
19
losing.
days, right?
Yeah. But so many three setters. I mean, she could have lost to Rusa in the second round. Like, she had all those breakpoint chances against her against Rybakina in the fourth round. Like, even Collins had her 3-love in the second set. Like, just so many of these comebacks. Svitolina as well wasn't easy. Like, she was down a set there. Like, it was just so many great players in a row. Yeah, basically 4 top 10 seeds. Like, yeah, I mean, the quote unquote big three that everyone coined at the start of 2023, she beats all of them. Like, it's an absolutely legendary run. So yeah, I don't know if we've seen anything like it. Certainly in this, like, the last 10, 15 years. Can't really think of one that comes close.
Yeah, not recently. I think there would be something in like the 2000s. There's runs when you beat like Eneo, Clijsters, and Williams on the
Mm.
or Serena, I mean, on the way to a
Like
slam
Graf
title.
probably, like Graf in 1999. I think she beats like 3-2 and 1 to win it.
Exactly. So I think back in the day, yes, but definitely not recently. Probably not since like Serena stopped being, stopped dominating the tour. I don't think we've really seen something like this where yeah, a player just goes through literally everybody they possibly can. I mean, in fact, sometimes it's even tough to do. Like from Iga's perspective, like it's kind of impossible for her to produce a run like this because of her seeding, right? She just wouldn't have it this tough. She wouldn't have to play Collins, Rybakina, Sabalenka, and let's say Goff on the way to a Grand Slam title.
Yeah. Another talking point that unfortunately this always happens every time Iga loses, but like there's a lot of internet discourse and people kind of find small things to like pick on in the match and stuff. Like, you know,
The
yeah, like obviously there's like the bathroom break after the second set, which is like,
Mhm.
at this point it's like, expected. Like she's gonna go to the restroom, come back, comes back in like 5 or 6 minutes, which didn't bother me at all. I mean, it never really does, but I don't know why people care so much. But then at the start of the third set, she does like those practice swings, and like Keys is getting ready for it, and I don't know, it just became such a big deal. I don't know if you have any like opinions or takes on it. I mean, I just refrained from all of that mostly.
I think it might have been you who said it like 5 or 6 episodes ago. I don't remember. Yeah, maybe. But I think one of us, or maybe I just heard it somewhere, someone saying that like basically you guys so focused on herself on the court that
Yeah.
sometimes she doesn't really like notice the other player. And
Mm.
I think that's one of these examples. Like, yeah, it looks very bad on camera. You
Yeah,
know,
it does.
he's is ready there, and Iga is like doing a billion practice swings. I think, it's not really like something she's doing like, it's not vile from her or anything like that. I think that she literally just kind of is in the moment and, doesn't even know that Madison is ready. But yeah, it doesn't look too good on camera. Do I personally care too much about it? Well, I understand why some people are going for it because it's kind of like a pattern of sorts with Świątek definitely over the years. So when people have that trend, they kind of just try to follow along. But did I think it was as big a deal as people made it out to be? I mean, not really. The set started 15 seconds later. And as usual, I've said this sort of regarding this many times, but like if this is not within the rules, then just time violation. Just punish her. That's the easiest way to actually make a player stop doing something that is not within the rules. Just the umpires should punish that and that's then the end of the topic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've mentioned this a few times that she's always like kind of in her own bubble and like so entrenched in it that sometimes, yeah, I mean, stuff like this happens where it's just like the optics don't look great, but I don't know if the intention and the amount of discourse that comes after it is really like proportional. But that's kind of what happens, when you're at this level and you have like a really big fan base like Ego does have, but then also some other people online who yeah they just if they find this trend and they see something like this, it just like adds more fuel to their campaign, I guess. But nonetheless, Iga now has a ton of points to defend coming up. So there's a good chance Sabalenka will still keep being number one. But yeah, this is generally the part of the season that Iga usually does well in. Doha, Indian Wells, the clay swing, obviously coming up afterwards. But yeah, so a lot of positives, I guess, to take away.
Yeah, lots of pressure, but we're gonna see. I mean,
Yeah,
Doha, Indian Wells, obviously she's winning this on like a very regular basis. Clay last year only one loss in Stuttgart. I mean, if she's able to keep up results like this, that would be fabulous. If they are a little worse, well, we have to see by, how much. Because again,
yeah,
she was just so dominant in all these events. She only basically was losing the sort of like back-to-back tournaments, right? So Dubai and Miami, where the conditions
mhm,
don't suit her as much also as in Doha and Indian Wells. Yeah, I think obviously it's also like still early days for that Wim partnership. I think after the Australian Open, like his, let's say, grade for the tournament, we kind of have to refrain from the judgment for now, I think. I mean, it's still a little early. And also the result was like such, we were thinking, okay, the semis is the minimum expectation. She got there like just like demolishing her opposition and also looking much more comfortable, definitely with the timing on these courts than in 2024. Was it because they were also playing a little differently, maybe? And yeah, I mean, by the semifinals, a lot of that kind of disappeared, or at least was diminished by both the keys performance, by the nerves. So I think, yeah, for now, we can kind of just come into the rest of the season, or at least the next few months, with similar expectations as usual. Like, we know that the courts will suit her, so the expectations have to be pretty high. I don't know if, as high as repeating what she did last year, but
Mm.
definitely she should be, in the running and, well, basically the main contender for all of these events.
Yeah, for me, I think like those four tournaments that you mentioned, like Stuttgart, Madrid, generally, is more opportunity for the rest of the field when it comes to the clay swing, and then, if she can grab anything of like Miami and Dubai, that's already a big bonus. And you feel like Indian Wells is pretty good for her. Rome, pretty good. Doha has been pretty good in the past. So yeah, um, that's kind of where we're at with Iga. And obviously, we talked about Keys' run as well, and we talked about yeah some of the big takeaways. There's not much to talk about really in the first 5 rounds as far as it was just demolitions all around. So yeah, and then we have to move on to Carlos because well he came in no warm ups, and obviously we saw a few changes right off the bat. 5 more grams I think to the throat of his racket, I believe. A little bit of a different type of backhand setup, which we saw already kind of at the end of last year. So nothing too drastically different there. And the serve looks different for sure. It's like a much more fluid motion. There's less of like a hitch at the very top of the swing. So obviously, I think we were interested to see how that looked early on. And he actually wasn't tested too much. I mean, he lost the third set in the third round, made some unforced errors there, but then quickly rebounded, played a great fourth. First 2 rounds were pretty smooth sailing. Um, and then, I think the Draper match was a bit weird because obviously Jack was coming off of those three back-to-back five setters. And then, yeah, I think so. There wasn't really too much we learned. But then, obviously the main focus was going to be that Djokovic match at night, which, by the way, I mean, was his first time on Rod Laver Arena, I think, in the quarters. I mean, he played once at night, I want to say in the first round, but it was Margaret Court. So he hadn't had played that combination before, which I think I was coming into that match feeling like, okay, it might be a bit of a slow start for Carlos against Novak, and then we'll see kind of how it goes. But originally I was like pre-tournament, I was pretty confident that Carlos would win this match against Novak. But then as I saw Djokovic beat Lehechka and I think Mahach the round before, were playing really well, I kind of was thinking like, okay, no, this is going to be a real battle. This is going to be, this could be one of their epics that we saw in Cincinnati and Wimbledon, and maybe yeah, maybe Carlos won't have it quite enough. But it was encouraging the way he played that first set after he went down a break. Obviously there's a lot of nerves. You can clearly see it even when he's walking on the court. His level of tension and his body language and just kind of his demeanor. Like he's not really smiling when he walks on the court when he's playing Djokovic. And it's a bit different when he plays center. I think you put it really well in a tweet that like you feel like Carlos is, you know, like there's a lot of hype going into these matches, but there's a lot of hype going into the center match as well. But I feel like that doesn't really come in the way of his nerves as much recently as it does with Novak. So if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think in some of his later interactions during the match, he was actually acting a bit differently than in the previous matches against Novak. Like he was really, going into it with the crowd, and I think he was still like laughing about a lot of stuff. And I did like that, but at the same time, it didn't really show in his play. Like, yeah, he was definitely very tentative. Serve return, the fact that they weren't good, I don't know if this is also connected to it or not. Obviously, when you have that like big match and you have a lot of pressure on yourself, it's going to be tougher to like keep up with the technical changes that you've made, right? Because you're just going to get back to the old stuff. Like this is normal. The fact that he was like choosing the return position, well, seemingly just completely wrong in the next three sets, that also could be nerves related. I generally find it fascinating that when Carlos plays Sinner, he's like the best tactician of all time. And then against Novak, he's the worst tactician of all time. Is it just simply the fact that Novak has so much experience and like, yeah, he is also a super intelligent player? Maybe it's just that sort of a gap. Maybe Yannick and Carlos don't have it yet because they haven't amassed all these years. But yeah, as you said, I think the Djokovic matchup has always felt special to Carlos, and we've seen it many times. I know he's had great performances against him. In fact, the very first match that they played against each other might still be my favorite match that they played against each other. And that was phenomenal, sure. That was like fearless. That was the one where maybe against Nadal, the first performances weren't that good. Against Djokovic, he was absolutely fearless. But then, of course, Roland Garros, that was the one where everybody was like hyping him up as, he's going to win this, the semifinal in 2023. And we know that there was this huge story where, like, yeah, he basically couldn't sleep before that match. Then, of course, the Cincinnati one, where, okay, in the actual match, maybe for the most part, he's not that nervous, but then you have the hand cramps in the first set tiebreak. And there were a lot of theories regarding this match potentially kind of like destroying the rest of his season there. And then we have the Olympics last year, where he's clearly very nervous as well. And then, of course, the next month is just like him kind of losing the passion, even you could say, for the sport for a while. So clearly, the Djokovic matchup has always been very different, which I think on a psychological level is understandable. I mean, Yannick, they've basically grown up together. Of course, they weren't like, in the actual junior events, because Yannick picked up the racket so early, they weren't meeting too much. I don't know if they were ever really in the same draws. But then, of course, they play that first match 15 and 17. So it's just so much easier to treat this guy as your peer, as your contemporary. And Novak is, you're still playing a legend. It would seem that after winning some great battles like the Wimbledon 5-set final, right? That was such a clutch performance from him. You would feel like this should be gone by now, but it's clearly not. Why is it not? I mean, I don't know, but maybe the big positive takeaway is that Novak is not going to be around forever. But it would still, of course, be better for Carlos to
Yeah.
kind of figure this out on his own. I think, yeah, the performance as a whole was definitely very low quality. He should have broken back in the fourth at the very least. And from there, I mean, no idea. But it always felt like the match is still within reach. Like it was never like Djokovic is out of there already. But yeah, obviously you also have to credit Novak for the serving, for the returning, which he dominated, and also for the fact that like in these night slower conditions in Australia, he's still a wall.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that those psychological things we see him experience when he plays Novak versus Carlos. But in the first set, once Carlos kind of settled down, and you saw some patterns that could potentially work for him in this matchup. You saw him, like, for instance, use that cross court forehand and push Djokovic wide in that corner, and you could see that Djokovic wasn't pushing off the same way, and that was a pattern that seemed to work. That's when Novak injured himself, right, at 4-all in the first set. That was when we saw him kind of limping for the first time, and you kind of, at that point, I was like, oh, is this even going to be competitive? Is this going to be like Wimbledon? Because it looked for a while like Novak was in real trouble. Like, I think Novak even said maybe that if he hadn't won the second set, he would have maybe considered retiring.
I think
But
he did, yeah.
yeah, so that just kind of gives you a window into the state that Djokovic was in, which I think actually really helped him, because then after that he started really teeing off on those returns and just cutting points really short, and his ball striking improved like tenfold, and I think that really shocked Carlos, because Carlos was thinking, should I play this? Should I play this safe? Should I just get balls back? Should I just make him play another one? Or should I, like, so I think he kind of lost his venom from the back of the court. Like, he lost that clarity where in the first set, like, the venom was helping him, you know, overpower Novak basically, and he was winning more of the extended rallies. But that wasn't the case really in set two, and he was behind the whole time really. But I do want to point out one moment, and that was at 4-all love 15, when Novak hits a really slow second serve. And at this point, like, Carlos, he recovered from that love three deficit, and I think even 2 fours. So at this point, it was like kind of getting back on track for him, and you felt like this is an important game to just kind of show Novak that, okay, I am really in this to win this set, and then you know maybe it's a very different tournament from there. But like love 15, he comes in for like on like a nothing second serve, and the approach like wasn't good at all, and Djokovic just didn't even have to move to hit the pass. And I get what Carlos was doing. He was trying to do some kind of a saber thing, and it was like, in a surprise tactic. It would work if he's like really free in his mind. But I just didn't think that was the right play to do in that moment. He should have kind of, buckled down and played like more seriously in that moment, because I really think that was so crucial, because then he gets broken in the next game at love. And then like the whole match is just completely different from there. So yeah, like,
Yeah, I think first set the physical edge was also kind of building up, obviously with the injury, but also even before that, Carlos was down a break, but he's returning the second serve like very well, pretty far from the baseline, but it's so easy for him to get back into the point. The backhand down the line was amazing too.
mhm.
And I don't know, I'm not gonna sit here and accuse Novak of like faking injuries or anything like that. I'm definitely, of the opinion that like sometimes well, there are two schools of thought, right? You either don't show your opponent any weakness, or you actually kind of like show it maybe even more than it is sometimes. So I think Novak definitely belongs to that latter school with like Gael Monfils and Di Mari, Yannick
Yeah.
Sinner as
Even
well.
Yannick Sinner sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sinner
Yannick
was
Sinner as
good.
well, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think they definitely belong into that latter school of thought. But he was hurt. He was hurt. His intensity went down for a while. But the problem is that like so did Alcaraz's, and of course he was healthy. He was physically ready, and he just kind of went along with the injured opponent, which is obviously also a common thing in tennis. We see it all the time. But Djokovic got managed to restore it, and Alcaraz never really got back up on his feet. It's kind of wild that you can lose a match like this as well, even at this stage, after winning 4 Grand Slams. But yeah, it feels like even in this longer format, he just never really recovered what he had in the opening set.
Yeah. And at the start of the third set, I think the painkillers kicked in for Djokovic, so he really actually started moving closer to his normal, like that we know he can move on, and then he became so hard to hit through, especially in those slow conditions. So, and then all of a sudden, like then the intensity was way back, and like the focus, the drive, the motivation was like completely different. And yeah, and then Alcaraz has like 2-3 40-15 in that game, and then he just plays a very sloppy game, like 4 errors in a row, and just I think he just lost his head completely because of what was happening on the other side of the net. And we have to talk about the serve as well, because I think you know the main stat that came from this match is 33% of second serve points won for Carlos and 58% for Djokovic. So obviously a huge gap there, and we know that generally Djokovic is regarded as the greatest returner of all time, along with Agassi. But then Carlos, yeah, I just felt like the first serve, the spot serving wasn't quite there, and then on the second serve, it was just sitting up. Like it was just a kick serve, down the tee that Djokovic can just time perfectly, and it's right in his strike zone. And from there, Carlos is having to win these baseline rallies and where he's just on the back foot the whole time. So
Yeah,
yeah,
the kick serve was not really working in these conditions at all. And again, this is a thing that Carlos usually would should recognize at some point, but he doesn't. Like against Djokovic, he for some reason he doesn't. Like these are the sort of micro adjustments that he would probably make if he was playing Sinner, if he was playing, well, maybe not Zverev because we saw what happened in Australia last year. But yeah, the spot serving was pretty horrible. That's true. I mean, sure, Novak's a fantastic returner, but just like the first serve was not giving Carlos anything either. The only reason why the fourth set was close was because at that point Djokovic's serve wasn't actually doing all that much either. So like yeah, Carlos
yeah,
was basically in every single game, in every single point. I wonder of these like 58% points which you are mentioning, so like the second serve points for Novak, how many of these were like just unreturned by Carlos? Because I feel like the count of second serves that were unreturned was massive, and that's
mm,
not because Novak was like risking particularly. It's just because he was just trying to slam them and then not really getting that. I think there was one maybe moment in the fourth set where I felt like, oh, okay, there is something here. And that was the moment when he played a few points like mid-length slice. He brings Djokovic a bit forward and sets up for that deeper forehand. But even that required like, him to be pretty calm, him to be pretty aware, him to be ready to execute even like these sort of like pretty simple combos. And he kind of wasn't. Of course, there was also the famous rally, which could have been like the most legendary point of all time if Alcaraz wins the match and then wins the tournament. The 33 shot one, I think,
yeah,
which did keep him alive in the match. And it really felt like this could be a massive twist, especially considering I think he had 2 break points after that, but obviously it never really came to fruition. But that was super fun. Like the entire match, I was definitely not pleased with the quality that they were playing at. Like it didn't feel like their best at all. Probably one of the weakest matches we've seen from them, of course, not counting the Wimbledon final last year. But the fourth set, I can't deny that it was very compelling simply because it was so close. And the kind of the entertainment value wasn't hurt at all by the fact that Alcaraz was pretty nervous and was struggling to kind of get the basics right.
yeah. I kind of wonder also if he just found his level a bit too late, because he did go down a break in the fourth, and that for me was,
But he
I
had
was
so
like, oh
many
wow. Yeah.
chances to come back. Like,
Yeah, and then 15-40, I think, in that 4-3
yeah.
game, and then he shanks that forehand that could have been big, and then Djokovic hits that like serve and volley point on the next point. And I have to say, like the return tactics were a bit odd. from Alcaraz because I do like the deeper return position for him, and he never really went to it, even when he
Only in
was
the
getting
first set.
even when he was getting burned on the deuce side, with the one out wide. Even on the second serve, he was missing like second serve returns on the forehand, which it just surprised me that he couldn't figure that one out. And then also there were so many times where like he would stand in on the second serve return and Djokovic would go body or he'd go big, like almost a first serve. And Carlos didn't really have an answer to that. And we kind of saw this at the Olympics as well, except this time with the deep return position. He got burned with the spots that Djokovic was hitting. And I just feel like that's two matches in a row where like, the return hasn't been ideal for him at all. And then in combination with obviously, the second serve issues. Like that's where Djokovic won this match. It was the serve return battle, really.
For the most part, yeah. And then just basically being a wall of the ground in this fourth set, not allowing Alcaraz to get any free points, and yeah, basically everything had to be won 5 times, and that's tough to do when you're this nervous. But yeah, I don't think we can really just say that like he found his best level too late or something like that, simply because of how many chances he had in the fourth set. Well, I know technically just 2 break points, but like every single game was he was in every single Djokovic service game in the fourth set. Like it's not like he
Yeah.
didn't have
Even
ample
the last
opportunity
game,
to at least get back on serve. Even the last game, yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of 30 alls. There were a lot of chances to get back. But yeah, um, yeah. So what was I gonna say? Yeah, there were a lot of chances to get back, but I do feel like in those higher octane chances, like the quality that got really good from like 2-1 in the fourth at the end of the match, like yeah, I mean that was some of the best tennis that we saw them play, and it's like Carlos can actually hang when they're playing that kind of style, like the 33 point shot, 33 shot rally, or you know,
Was a bit
what,
fortunate to survive that. A couple of gets that like find the baseline, but you don't unnecessarily feel so sure about that when they're, just when they're flying over the net. But maybe, yeah. I mean,
yeah,
it's actually similar losses, sort of in a way, for both Świątek and Alcaraz, like frustrating ones. At least in terms of Iga, we said that there was some progress compared to last year, but was there any progress, for Alcaraz to the Zverev match from last year?
maybe a little bit, but then I mean the negatives outweigh the positives here, right? Because he was thinking in the first set, he was clear, he was, you know, he almost like if Djokovic was healthy the whole time, you kind of would trust Alcaraz more. But just yeah, I mean it's crazy how that works. But then also like there's so much internal pressure that I feel like that Alcaraz feels when he plays Djokovic. He's like thinking I should be winning this, and
I
you
guess
kind
he
of
is,
see
yeah.
that.
And that
Yeah.
was probably always the case when he was like playing him and, all the examples I mentioned, right? Around Garros 23, like people are just straight up expecting him to win this so easily.
Even the
Maybe
Olympics, I
maybe
think he
not
was
at
telling him.
Wimbledon last year, but that was, I don't know, the physical edge was just too much.
Yeah, he kind of was thinking like, okay, I can win this. Like I should win this. Actually, not I can win this. I should win. So
Hmm.
I think that's kind of the big.
Maybe even I have to.
Yeah, I have to because the thing is that like Carlos is so young. He's gonna have many more chances. He's gonna win more majors, but Djokovic is not gonna be around for like you know longer than a year or two. So like I don't know. Like what does it look like if Djokovic ends up retiring with like a 6-3 or 6-4 head to head over Carlos,
It's quite
and then
likely
Carlos
right now.
Carlos ends up going on, ends up winning double digit slams like a lot of people expect him to. But then, it's like, well, you couldn't beat a 37-year-old Djokovic. And no, that's not really the case because he beat him in two Wimbledon finals. And he did beat him in a very high quality 2023 Wimbledon, where Djokovic had one of the best seasons of his career. So obviously you can't really make it that way, but you know that some people are going to argue like that. So I wonder if some of that enters Carlos's
Oh, they will for sure.
conscious.
I mean, I think they're already arguing like this, that
Yeah. So
I think none of us could have really predicted how long Djokovic would be on the tour, and same goes for Nadal and Federer. Like, there were all these lost generations that were lost because of these people, but yeah, then there's the new one who is supposed to just like smoothly take over, and or I don't know, like it's Zverev, Medvedev, Rublev, Tsitsipas, they come in and they start losing to Djokovic, Nadal, and Federer, but everybody's like, okay, wait 2 years, they're not gonna be around, and no, I mean Djokovic is still around. I don't know if he still, has a slam in him or not, but definitely at this one, he was in the conversation. And just like you, by the way, I don't think I reacted to this, but Yeah, as the event went on, I was definitely far less confident in Alcaraz beating Djokovic simply because of how Novak looked against Mahac and Lehechka, how he didn't like waste any time there.
Yeah, and obviously like it was really excellent stuff from Novak in the third and fourth. He made only 6 on 4 stars, I believe. Alcaraz made like 20. So I mean, it just kind of shows you he was how locked in he was and just how well he sort of played with the injury. So yeah, it was kind of it was kind of a bit sad the way I don't want to say sad like as in like like how it played out at the end, but it's just like the last week of the tournament wasn't as compelling as the first at all. That's what I meant to say. Like the first week had all the great stories, had all the great exciting matchups, everything, and then the second week it's just I don't think we got a five setter after the fourth round. So
Yeah, the second week was horrible. We're kind of getting used to that. I think at some point on like another show, I just said that, well, we just need one more thing to make this event good. And that's someone pushing Sinner. I don't care if Yannick wins or not. I don't care if who it is. Is it Shelton? Is it Zverev? Is it Djokovic? But someone pushing him to like 5 sets. Just this one more classic. And obviously we didn't get that. And it actually becomes, a bit of a question whether the US Open or the Australian Open, like which run was more obvious for Sinner, which one was clearer. I think when the draw was made, the US Open was standing out a bit more, especially when Carlos lost this early. Here, at least, we had this intrigue for a while because, there was that quarter of Alcaraz Djokovic, and then the semi is against Zverev. And yeah, the winner of that will probably trouble Yannick. Of course, the winner of that didn't even generate a breakpoint in the final. So in the end, it's a pretty similar dull slam. It's not Yannick's fault. He's just way too
yeah,
good right now.
he's just way too good that no one is pushing him into those like physical matches that we want to see
Yeah.
Sinner in because yeah, I mean that's kind of what it's about because like he hasn't won a match over 4 hours, but like who cares because he's winning like in straight sets every time. And I know Rona got a set, and I know Tristan Schoolgate took a set in the second round. But yeah, I think it's the third time in the 21st century that like someone in the final like didn't even get a break point.
And it's very like obvious when you look at the players who didn't pull that off before, which were Mark Philippoussis and Kevin Anderson, that Alexander Zverev probably should not be in the same conversation in terms of how self-reliant he is, because yeah, he's
It's
just
more an
not.
indictment actually on Zverev that he didn't get to a break point really.
Yeah.
You know,
Only on him. Like the fact that Philippoussis didn't get a break point in 3 sets against Federer and Grass or Anderson, and even on hard courts against Nadal. Well, actually, maybe. Well, it's gonna be tough on clay either way. Never mind. But yeah, I mean, Philippoussis, Anderson, Zverev, they just don't really belong in the same conversation.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then Zverev has like also really easy sort of path. I mean, I know Tommy Paul like should have won the 2 sets. Zverev should not have been up 2 sets love in that match, but and I know he lost a set to Umber I think in the fourth round, and then there was that retirement against Djokovic. But you're coming into the match thinking like, okay, Zverev is fresh physically for the first time in a long time at the end of a major. Like, you know, that wasn't the case at Roland Garros when he got himself embroiled in those five setters against Runa and Greek Spor. I think he was down 4-1 in the fifth. So like you're coming into this feeling like, okay, like physically you should be able to push Yannick. He might. I don't think he's. Uh, Anybody was expecting him to like just come through mentally in the clutch because he just hasn't done that in his career. But you had the feeling like, okay, this could be a long match, and nah, I mean it just ended up being a total disappointment. So
Zverev is the slog master. Like if you want someone to
yeah,
kill a match,
yeah,
yeah, Zverev is a good candidate, but he just wasn't able to do it. And we're just looking at like some random point. Well, not random, but like the 5-6-30 all point or the net court in the tiebreak. But that kind of shows you like we just have to look for grasp at straws, and that's actually precisely what Zverev was doing in the final too. Like he just started holding in the second set and just prayed that he was gonna win the second set somehow. And eventually, of course, he didn't. And that's when the match is done. Because even if Yannick just suddenly starts cramping or something like that, which it feels like his physical issues were the only thing that was like really hurting him against Runa in the fourth round, in literally the only memorable match he played during this entire event. Zverev played no memorable matches, by the way, during this entire event, I think. So yeah, that's another reason why this event didn't really like deliver, because the finalists just never had any, yeah, just never had any competitive showings, any competitive battles. But yeah,
Yeah.
in terms of that entire thing, like yeah, Zverev, I thought that was gonna be much closer. I thought it was gonna be at least physical. He never
Yeah.
really got it into that position. Some people I saw were like complaining that Zverev is, I don't know, like minus 17 on the winner unforced error count. But you gotta also factor in the fact that he's playing Yannick and like,
Yeah.
yeah, he just can't do more of the ground. I don't think Zverev showed anything special in the final, but he kind of just played at his average, usual level. He played what he can. Like he literally just
Yeah.
played what he has in his toolbox. He's not gonna be suddenly like the best volleyer on tour. He's gonna be okay
Forehand kept
with
breaking
it.
down, you know. The forehand kept
Forehand,
breaking down.
but at the
The
same time,
backhand
he was
was
hunting the
average.
forehands down the line. He was hunting the forehands down the line. Like
He was going for it more. Yeah. He was
yeah,
going
he
for the forehand
tried.
more.
Like this
Yeah.
is literally what he is. Like he's not just suddenly gonna become Roger Federer or Novak Djokovic in the final. You know,
Yeah, there's also a reason why he plays so far back, right? I mean, he has a bit of a longer wind up. He's got like, he's just more effective from back there. So
yeah.
he's never gonna be like, naturally gonna be like super offensive because that's like kind of not his style. I mean, it's
Yeah, I
kind of
think he
true
just
for Fine, right?
literally played his game. And
Yeah.
this wasn't a final where we can say that, okay, he choked or he performed below standards. No, he just played exactly what he
Consistent.
did the entire event. Was he fabulous the entire event? Not really. He just has a
No.
high floor. He was beating the players that he was supposed to. Djokovic gave him a retirement. Tommy Paul, of course, that was just such a weird match. But yeah, he got to the final and he played exactly the same way he did the entire fortnight. It's just not enough right now. I
Yeah.
think after the finals, Zverev also said that basically like Sinner is just a better player than me right now. I serve better than him. Every single thing every single other thing
Uh,
he does better. I don't know if I agree. I think Sinner might actually be the better
I
server
think
right now.
Sinner served better than him. Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. I mean, so where are we at, like in terms of overall Yannick and Carlos? Because people are always going to compare their careers and everything, and we have Yannick now on a 21 match win streak. He's won three majors. Okay, there's still the question of the natural surfaces with him, clay and grass. He's made semifinals of both. I mean, is this kind of a situation where it's like Carlos like really needs to get going here, or is this like Yannick is, well, just more and more complete, and he's just going to keep on you know being the best player in the world?
It's pretty open for now, it seems. I mean, obviously Yannick has had the dominance over the hardcourt slams the last three events. And yeah, it kind of puts the pressure on Carlos, I guess, to win more on at the French at Wimbledon. But at some point, we will get this hardcore showdown as well. Like, I would be fascinated. It would be fascinating to see like whether Carlos would also try to or like have a chance at finding something in this final potentially if he got there. Whether there would be another like Beijing sort of twist to it, or yeah, generally all the matches they played last year just had Carlos making good adjustments mid-match and winning from behind. So yeah, I mean, I guess at this point they're just kind of like even because Carlos has the four slams, Yannick has three. Of course, Carlos is also 2 years younger, but there's no question that the way that Yannick is dominating the tour right now, that's something that Carlos has never had.
Yeah, basically since he lost his Zverev at the U.S. Open in 2023, it's he's been the best player in the world. So it's been kind of the thing. But hardcourt majors, is that something else? I mean, obviously Carlos has the U.S. Open. He's made the semis there again. I mean, he's not got past the quarters here. Two kind of similar-ish, more negatives than positive performances against Zverev and Djokovic. Now we're gonna go to the February swing where he's gonna be playing Rotterdam, and I think Sinner is as well. So we could have a showdown between them there, and I think he's also gonna play Abu Dhabi. So no golden swing for Carlos this year, and some more maybe a chance to win an indoor title. I mean, it's gonna be obviously a really strong field in Rotterdam, but
Yeah, I think the Golden Swing was not really like working out the way it was supposed to. He still got into Indian Wells fine both
yeah,
years, but he was just kind of tiring himself out there for seemingly not much of a reason. Like, why would you switch surfaces there? Like, it's not, yeah, it probably was just like an appearance fee slash sponsorship type of deal.
yeah,
Right now, he's just gonna play some different events. Well. Indian Wells is more important than Rotterdam or Abu Dhabi.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's gonna be fun to see him in new scenarios. Abu Dhabi, by the way. But
Doha, I think
yeah,
Doha.
Doha. Okay,
Doha was a
yeah,
500.
yeah. I just repeated after you, but I was like,
Yeah, I have Abu Dhabi on my mind because actually tennis one is going to be the official after
okay,
Rotterdam and Abu Dhabi, and they're in the same week. So
okay. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, it's gonna be fun to see him in new settings, but I think it's definitely okay to get rid of the golden swing for him. They actually signed up. Who did they sign up? Like Zverev? Yeah, I think
yeah.
it's
Zverev
Zverev,
is going
right?
to be playing Rio and Buenos Aires, and
Yeah,
so
so they basically just ended up getting another star in
yeah,
instead of Carlos.
yep. Um, so yeah, we have a good back and forth right now with Carlos and Yannick splitting the last five majors. There's still a question of like is Djokovic in kind of a similar type of boat as Zverev? Like, does he need like some draw luck as well? Because obviously, he can beat one of these guys, but then to win these, you have to beat like three of them or two of them at least. And yeah, it's like similar type of situation for both Djokovic and Zverev, but for different sort of reasons. Like Djokovic kind of has the higher floor, he has the experience, or sorry, higher peak level, whatever, and like the experience, and Zverev like is still looking and searching, and he may not, if Djokovic retires, he may not have to go through like he may only have to beat one of them, but even beating one of them right now is pretty tough. So
Yeah, I'm laughing because I said literally the same thing a couple of hours ago on another show that like, yeah, Zverev and Djokovic are kind of in the same boat right now. They need a lot of stars to align, especially for Zverev this event. They aligned, but still not enough. Like, still he couldn't beat Yannick. But I guess like the recipe for both of them is just keep trying and beat anybody who's not Sinner and Alcaraz. And if you get into a match with them, go for it. Maybe you still can. Djokovic just beat Alcaraz. Zverev beat Alcaraz last year in Australia. I mean, yeah, it's still possible, obviously. But yeah, definitely gotta kind of watch out for these chances and not waste them. So like Zverev cannot be losing to Taylor Fritz and three big events in 2024 if he wants to win a Grand Slam.
yeah. And then obviously we have a bit of a situation where like Djokovic is struggling against Sinner. When I say struggling, like losing the matches, and then like Alcaraz is beating Sinner, and like Sinner is beating Djokovic. So it's kind of like this, but obviously it's very variable and it changes a lot, and it depends on the surface and conditions and everything. But yeah, I think if you ask Djokovic right now who would he rather play, he'd probably rather play Carlos than play Yannick. So it's just interesting.
100%, yeah. I think I wonder what Carlos would say. Probably still Novak, but yeah, with Novak it's very obvious. Yeah, I mean he clearly has a better shot against Carlos. Yannick is too much of a Djokovic 2.0.
Yeah. I mean that's literally what Zverev said. I think also in his press conference that it's like he's playing Djokovic at his best right now. So
Yeah, and when that happens, like if there's like a similar game or at least similar efficiency, and one player is just that 5% better in every aspect, how
yeah,
do you push for an edge? Whereas, yeah, I mean, if you have a completely different temperament and then like set of abilities, then that's when you can actually just like come up with something. And I guess that's also part of Djokovic's strengths, as we can see. Like not only the fact that he made his game a little, just faster, a little bit less, let's say, taxing over the years, but also, yeah, just the simple tennis IQ/experience that he's gathered.
absolutely. All right. Well, I think that about covers it for the Australian Open in terms of our recap. I think we'll be back next time for we'll do it at the end of Rotterdam, assuming Carlos still plays that. And then, we have the Middle East 1000s coming up for Iga. So yeah, February is probably like the busiest month of the ATP and WTA tours in the sense you've got events in like basically every part of the world and continent. So do they actually mean that much? Well, we'll see. I mean, not so much for Carlos and Iga because it's really still the focus is the slams and the big 1000s. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see like
I mean,
where
more
the
so
pendulum.
for Iga, right? Because you have two 1000s.
Yeah, yeah.
So on the WTA Tour, yes. On the
On the
ATP, it's
ATP, not
definitely
so
a
much.
month of, let's say, the top players not meaning as much. I mean, they still
Yeah,
play. Yannick won Rotterdam last year, for example, right? But
yeah,
it's a week of odd of like a week, a month of other players being in the spotlight. WTA Tour less, so I think yeah, for sure Doha, Dubai, especially now that both will be to 1000s every single year.
Yep. All right. Well, you guys know where to find us on social media, and yeah, this will be up on YouTube and all the podcast platforms as well. So leave a rating, reviews, uh, leave us a review on iTunes. Subscribe to our YouTube page, and yeah, thanks again, Damien, and we'll see you guys next time.